Okay, welcome everyone to our regular meeting of council, Monday, December 9th, 2019 at 2 p.m. Before we start, we will recognize that we're holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Sechot and Hoopachesit First Nations. We have an agenda in front of us, and are there any late items from councillors? Okay, seeing none. City Clerk, late items?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have 4 pieces of correspondence to be added to the agenda at item D2, one of which is from the BC Housing and ACAUS regarding the proposed second stage housing, and the 3 pieces of correspondence expressing opposition to that are from Mr. McCrae, Miss Mager, and Mrs. Sylvain, Yeager, that should be, and Miss Lane.
Thank you. Could we get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there okay, any comments? All in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the special meeting held at 12:30 p.m., the regular meeting held at 2 p.m. on November 25th, and the annual organizational meeting held at 7 p.m. on December 2nd. Would somebody like to move approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a seconder? Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. So that brings us to public input period, and public input period is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council. We usually take a maximum of 4 speakers, and you get 3 minutes to speak. Would anybody like to present to council? Come on forward. Yeah. And you've done this before, but please just Oh, I think you have. I think you have. If you could just introduce yourself and state your address for the record, please.
My name is Jeff Cook, and I live here in Alberni on Church Street. I just want to, wait, I'll open this up here. I just want to talk a little bit about the community Christmas dinner we're having on Christmas Day. I'll have to read it because if I start going on, I'll start rambling, so I'll just read it. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Kim McDonald, who is from the Hawaii First Nation. And not here is Brian Com from Pizza Factory, Val McDonald from Benjamin Moore Paint, and Susan, who is a citizen at large, I guess you could call her. Together, we're the coordinators for the 2019 Community Christmas Dinner. We are here today to talk about Uaklak, Muschum. Loosely translated in Nutranat, it means taking care of people. So that's what it's all about. We're here to invite citizens of the Valley to this event, particularly those that are disadvantaged, the single mothers, the unemployed, the people on basic income, basically. The homeless, people at the shelter, anybody that's, lonely people, pensioners, single people, people that don't have family here. So we want to invite them to this event because, this is the most critical time of the year or loneliest time of the year where everybody is at home being happy, but these are vulnerable people that, we want to help out. But at the same time, we're inviting the general public to come join us, just to have a dinner with us, to mingle with us, and to get the feel of a friendly atmosphere. We're often asked why we're doing this. Kim here can attest to, and her sister Val can attest to that. In their lifetime, they knew the struggles they went through as single parents and how they had to live on social assistance. And there's other people like myself and Brian who said, we want to give back to the community that we belong to. So that's why we're basically involved. And we know there's a lot of other people that do want to help out, volunteers, and the donors, especially the donors. We get a lot of people that want to donate. Well, not a lot of people, but everybody we ask, they want to help out somehow, because it's always a feel-good time for them and for the people that want to volunteer. They really love the idea on having an actual event on Christmas Day. Just a little bit about the backstory. This all started in 2013.
You're flashing, but you can keep going as long as it's...
Okay. Leave me alone. I'm almost finished. Okay. Just started in 2013 where we, where Brian at the Pizza Factory made up a few hampers, 4 hampers to give them away. Next year he did more hampers and give them away. And then 2015 he had a dinner sponsored, cooked dinner for 200 people. And it was kind of a rotating buffet they had there where they had to eat and go out. So we managed to secure the athletic hall on that the next year, in 2017, and that time we spent 400 people, and 300, and we found that there's a lot of interest there, but it snowed that year. So this year we're hoping for it doesn't snow or be bad weather, and we're expecting maybe 400 and as we go along, it'll probably be climbing up. So that's what it's all about, and we're here to get your support for this event in any way you can, and to invite you as public officials to come and be with us for, even if it's for 15-20 minutes, to let them know that there's support out there for in the community also. So that's my basically presentation.
Okay.
Any comments and questions? Or? Christmas Day. Mark that down. Christmas Day. We open the doors at 12. We serve at 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock.
Great. Councillor Haggard?
Can you maybe tell everyone who to contact if they want to volunteer or make a donation?
Yeah, they can contact myself, Kim, Pizza Factory, or Benjamin Moore Paint on 10th Avenue. And we're on Facebook. We're going public. We're always on public advertising the event and acknowledging our donors and our volunteers. We think that's important that we acknowledge all the people that are helping out.
The name that's on the paper there, Look Community Christmas Dinner, is what our page is called on Facebook.
That's great.
That's where people can reach out to volunteer if they want or donate.
Thank you. And I'll share the page on my Facebook as well so that people can find it if they're watching this meeting.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to you guys for coming and telling us about it, and thanks to your group for putting on the dinner as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there other members of the public who would like to speak during public input period? Anyone to speak during public input period?
Can I take the next street?
There's a lot of people here, just making sure no one else wants to speak. All right, we'll move on. Thank you. Okay, so on to delegations. The first delegation we have from the Uptown Merchants Association, we have Barb Millart in attendance to present council a donation from the Uptown Merchants Association for the cost of decorative lighting in the Uptown area. Come on forward. And Chris Washington.
She's just here for moral support. Mayor, councillors, staff, my name's Barb Millart. I own Treadsetter Shoes on 3rd Avenue. And Chris and I are here as part of the Uptown Merchants Association. And we would like to partner with the city after Christmas to replace the colored lights in the trees on 3rd Avenue with white lights. But it's an expensive proposition, so we would like to start off with just lighting 8 trees. 4 in Chris's block, 4 in my block. And we would like to partner with the city in doing that. We have a donation of $520 from the merchants towards that. Anything else, Chris?
We're going to continue to fundraise. I think we want you to know that we are committed to the Uptown Core, and this is a way of showing that we are committed to making change up there, keeping things lit, bright. Barb spearheaded this herself. She has gone around, and you know better than anyone that sometimes people don't get back to you. They don't respond to your emails or your calls, and she's been diligent, so this is a start for us.
Yes, it's just a start. We're hoping to have a bigger buy-in to the project, but it's going to take us some time. But we would like to get the trees lit for January, for when the color lights are turned off. I had a discussion with the people that light the trees. Gary Bender's an amazing fellow at doing it, and they'll double wrap the trees so that the colored lights remain, the white lights go over top, and in next year they can just switch them up.
So smart. Well, that's great. Well, I want to really thank you guys, not only for bringing this forward and all you've done in the Uptown, both of you and your group, but for fundraising for the initiative as well. It makes it so much easier to support things like this because we do have so many funding requests. It makes a big difference when you go around and work to fundraise the money on your own. So we really appreciate the contribution and your commitment to the Uptown area as well.
Thank you.
And I will come forward to accept the money. I have no one to take a picture here. No manager of communications, no media. Let's have a picture.
Okay.
You need it also, Chris.
Come on, Chris.
Come on in. I'll cut you right there. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll give this to you guys, so. Okay. Hope everyone here today has money to present to us. Our next delegation is Sean Rorison, Development Manager at BC Housing Corporation, in attendance to speak about the Alberni Community and Women's Services Society Second Stage Housing Project. Welcome forward. And I forgot to say for the last one, because we knew that they would be brief, but we usually give 10 minutes for our delegations and then have time for questions after from council.
Okay. My name's Sean Rorson. I'm a development manager with BC Housing. My primary role is new construction throughout the Vancouver Island region, anywhere from Souk all the way to Port Hardy, and of course here in Port Alberni. With me today also is Fraser Dow, the architect on this project, and Ellen Frood, Executive Director of the Alberni Community and Women's Society. Oh, here it is. Right? That works? Okay, great. So just briefly on the role of BC Housing is to facilitate the creation of new affordable housing across the housing spectrum. And we use this word housing spectrum in BC Housing to describe everything from your homeless shelter all the way up to near market housing, so semi-affordable housing. And BC Housing is active across this spectrum. We build facilities of all types with different mixes all across the province. And our desire is to create financially and environmentally sustainable developments. So of course that we're creating energy efficient buildings that fit the mood and character of neighborhoods, and that are also going to be sustainable and useful for the community for many decades to come. And we're also we want to maintain consistency with regional and community priorities. So our desire again is to meet community needs. We're coming here to meet a community need. And again, we partner with nonprofits, Indigenous communities, development communities, service providers, and municipalities. And that's really important. We need local partners when we come into a community. We don't just walk into a community and decide what's done. A community needs to come to us and tell us what they need, and then we find a solution for them. And this is more building on the partnership model, building on the community-based housing delivery concept, that we look for partners, nonprofit partners, First Nations, and private developers, and then financial institutions, community champions, to tell us what they need in their community. They come to us, they submit proposals, and then we figure out a way to help them. And we also need local government support. Again, we go through every single municipal approval process that is laid out in front of us. We follow every municipal requirement. We are here to work closely with the municipalities to make sure that everyone is satisfied with what we're doing in their community. We also work with the federal government through capital grants. There's the CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. They also offer grants to societies and other communities to help build projects. And again, we are a part of the provincial government, but we work with other branches of our provincial government to do what we do. And then the health authorities, which are also very important. We need health authority support when we're building a more supportive model of housing in a community. So the purpose of this presentation today is to request a letter of intent that states the City of Port Alberni Council will enter into a letter of intent to begin the process of exploring the lease and redevelopment of the city-owned land for second stage housing. And this letter of intent is a part of the process to get to construction for this second stage housing in Port Alberni. The initial stage was to actually have money available, and this program is called the Women's Transition Housing Fund. And transition housing, in this case, involves second stage housing, and second stage housing is intended to be long-term housing for women at risk of violence. And then we discussed site selection, and in this case we found a site that we thought would be suitable for this project within the community. And now I'm requesting the letter of intent. We're requesting letter of intent from the City of Port Alberni to enter into discussions to draft a lease that will satisfy the requirement to build this facility in your community. After that point, we will enter into a more exhaustive community consultation process where every member of the community will have an opportunity to discuss the project, address their concerns, and discuss what exactly the facility will entail and how we can best build the facility to meet everyone's needs and requirements to everyone's satisfaction. And then, of course, we go through the municipal approvals process, and then we end up in construction at some point later. Just a bit more about the Women's Transition Housing Fund. The province is investing $734 million over the next 10 years to build and operate 1,500 new units to support women and children at risk of violence. So the target demographic is women and their children who are at risk of violence and or who have experienced violence. And there are 4 typical models. There's the safe home, which is where if someone has to go immediately to get out of immediate danger, a transition house, and then a second stage housing, which is what we're discussing this afternoon, which is long-term housing before an individual can end up back into society into a more permanent housing basis. And we always partner with a nonprofit service provider who is interested in developing and operating new rental housing. And that's important. Again, we need the local champion, we need the local community provider to tell us how it's going to be done and how it's going to be operated, so we can tailor this to the community's specific needs. So the need in Port Alberni, the Alberni Community and Women's Services Society Transition House accommodates around 101 women and 60 children on average per year. RCMP domestic violence arrests with charges within the City of Port Alberni average 98 per year, and the existing transition house within Port Alberni has reported an occupancy rate of over 97%. So it's very much saturated, and there is very much a need for more housing of this type within the community. So the letter of intent would set out a proposed partnership between the City of Port Alberni and BC Housing for the lease and redevelopment of the properties currently owned by the city. It is not a legally binding document at this stage. It merely sets out the intent of the two parties. And it does not assume the city will approve the future planning submissions, which again points back to the fact that we intend to follow every single municipal approval process you have. It is our desire and requirement to follow all of your approvals procedures. So the subject site is on the corner of Rosewood and Vimy Street. It's around 2,774 square meters. The trees on the eastern edge of the property will be maintained. And now we've already have an architect on this project, and we have some initial conceptual designs to share. Here's the preliminary concept, and I'm going to invite Fraser Dow up to just discuss the initial design decisions.
Hello, my name is Fraser Dow. I'm with Range Architecture. I'm part of the design team that's looking at the initial concept designs here, and that design team does include McGill Engineering, who are locally here in town, who are providing the structural and civil engineering expertise at this stage of the project. So this rendering is a draft preliminary rendering that just gives you a sense of the form and character the building might take, and it tries to draw on just some residential materials and gable roofs that would fit in terms of style to the neighborhood. So this is a sketch from the landscape architect, again preliminary stage, and you can see the building is proposed to take an L-shaped form, and that is to retain the stand of Douglas fir trees on the east side of the site, and the main spaces on the ground floor and outdoor playground and amenity spaces would face the stand of Douglas fir trees there. Here's some additional details from the landscape architect. You can see there's proposed planters on the front corner of the site, therapeutic planting beds. Just one of the many features they are proposing to include that would enhance the outdoor spaces for everyone living there.
Thank you, Fraser. Now I'm going to invite Ellen Fruit up to make some comments and discuss the local support.
Thank you. As Executive Director of ACAUS, I'm thrilled to be here today talking about this. This has been a project that has been spoken about by our organization for probably about 15 years now. So with thanks to BC Housing, having it become closer to being a reality is very, very important. And so we're really hopeful that we'll have support from council and the community. In preparing for this, I know that there's always a fear about what's going to happen and what kind of people live in projects and places like this, right? So we already have a transition house, which was mentioned by Sean, and we asked some of the people in the neighborhood if they might be able to write a little bit about something about what it's like to be a neighbor of ACAUS. And so here you go. It says, "To whom it may concern, my husband and I have lived across the road from the transition house on," it's a big secret where it is, by the way, so I'm not going to say the street because we don't publish that, for 5 years now, and have never had a bad experience or been bothered in any way. We are very glad that this service is offered in our community for women and children that need help, and we're very glad to hear that more housing will be available to them in the near future. Sincerely, resident, and I prefer not to name the street name because we truly don't speak about the name of the street where our transition house is. This one says, "To BC Housing and ACAUS, I'm writing to give testimony," and I forgot my glasses today, folks, so I apologize. My figures, I forgot my wallet. I have no money either. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah. On our experience being a neighbor on the ACAUS housing property, we have lived next door to the transition house for 19 and a half years, and since June 2000. For us, it has been a good experience. It's so well supervised. If there's an issue, it's immediately dealt with. The outside grounds are well maintained, and most important, we feel safe in our neighborhood, both for the transition house and for ourselves. I think those are really powerful statements. And one more, we've lived across the road from the women's shelter since August 2015. We've had no negative issues with the shelter. They have been great neighbors and have kept the property well maintained. So, you know, as I say, people are always going to be concerned about what will happen. What I want people to understand is that we're serving a very vulnerable population, and we will be putting measures in place to ensure not only they but the neighbors are safe as well. And I think that's a key priority for everybody. And I look forward to the public consultation and the processes down the road to discuss this more. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Councillor Washington.
Thank you. In the presentation, you mentioned Q1 and Q2 transition houses in Port Alberni. Do you have any idea, is there a history of police having to attend anything happening at these two houses, or are they just pretty much?
So we only have one house here in Port Alberni for starters, and we have had to call our CMP sometimes. It's actually to protect our staff internally. We deal in this community, like everybody else, with issues of substance use every once in a while. That can be an issue. On average, we probably have about 5 calls a year, if that. More often, the RCMP are bringing us to bring them to safe housing.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If everything goes smoothly and according to plan, which things usually don't when you're building, but do you have a projected opening date that you'd like to see?
I guess ideally we could have this open early in 2021. That would be ideal for us at BC Housing.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay. The only question I have, and you might not have an answer to this right now, but I remember at UBCM last year, the Premier mentioned how long it's been since the last investment in housing from the provincial, new units of housing for women and children fleeing domestic abuse. And I think he said it was something like 20 years since the last units were developed.
Yeah, I think that's correct, 20 years. It's been
Yeah.
20 years since we've had funding to build these kinds of units in the province.
Yeah, so that number was really shocking to me, especially for a community like Port Alberni, where we do have higher than average domestic abuse, and it's a serious concern for our community. So I'm really thankful to see some of this funding coming into our community, and thankful that we have a partner in ACAUS who is established in the community and has built up a positive reputation in managing this type of housing. So thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments, we do have some correspondence to receive before we consider our motion. So items D2A through D2D. Are there any comments on the correspondence we've received? Councillor Haggard.
I think once we start going through the public process, I think a lot of these concerns will be addressed at that time.
Absolutely. Okay. Councillor Haggard, would you like to move receipt of the 4 pieces of correspondence?
I will, thank you.
Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, and any further comments, questions on the correspondence? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And would anyone like to read the motion that's there? Councillor Poon?
I'll move that council authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the letter of intent between the City of Port Alberni and BC Housing Management Commission, which sets out the proposed partnership between the city and BC Housing for the lease and redevelopment of properties owned by the city for the purpose of building a new second stage housing for women and their children.
Okay, thank you. And any further comments? Okay, and I just wanted to note for people, whether here or not, who have expressed concern through the correspondence or in other ways, I think it's important to just remember that this is the beginning of the process, and there will be more opportunities for the public to have input and be a part of this process as it moves forward. So this is just the first step. Okay, so on that, on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for presenting today. Moving on to item 3 on our delegation list, we have Marcy DeWitt in attendance to talk about the 2019 Child Care Action Plan. Welcome.
Thank you. So thanks for having us here today, Mayor and Council. It's myself as well as Tracy Smith. We are 2 of a 3-person team that prepared the Child Care Needs Assessment for the ACRD in 2019. This was prepared through a UBCM grant, which we pursued on behalf of the Alberni-Clyquot Regional District, municipalities of City of Port Alberni, municipalities of Ucluelet and Tofino. So it was a collaborative plan for the entire region. And we're just here to present a little bit about that for you today. And
there we go. So it was an absolute privilege to be able to really find a local voice to what really is a provincial crisis in childcare. And so I'm going to tell you about our methodology, and because action needs to happen at all sorts of levels, and as you know, it's really important to have really informed information to inform that action. So we started out with an inventory of childcare spaces, and that actually took, we interviewed every single childcare facility in the region to really get more than just the numbers, but to get how long are your wait lists, how often do you have wait lists, what is the impact on your staff, so a little bit more depth there. We did a policy plan and bylaw review, which is also in the report, which will be helpful for you guys for sure. Then we added to that with a regional parent survey. So this was filled out by families with children prenatal to age 12. Then we also surveyed the childcare sector, and this was not only people who were currently working in the childcare field, but we also wanted to hear the voices of people who had left it, because there's a huge turnover in the childcare sector as well, and so why did you leave and that kind of thing, as well as people just starting their career, to see from that perspective. And then we also added to that, because a survey can't do it all, with some interviews, focus groups, and open houses. And our focus groups in particular, we wanted to target some populations that have a different and unique experience. So we had focus groups of Indigenous families, newcomers, immigrant and refugee families, families with children with extra support needs, young parent families, so these are young moms who are also still in high school, and then we also did a variety of targeted interviews as well. And then we also did open houses, and they looked a little different in the Alberni Valley and the West Coast.
Yeah, so we customized our approach depending on the communities. In the Alberni Valley, we saw a lot more focus groups in order to engage families where they're already meeting. And then we did an open house with service providers to ensure that we had that ability to bring together a large amount of voices. On the West Coast, it's a little bit different. The early childhood educators already had a very significant venue that they were coming together, so we used that to engage them in a focus group. And then we worked with families to organize open houses in both Ucluelet and Tofino, as well as utilizing the targeted interviews to fill in the additional information.
So as you'll see in your report, you can go ahead to the next one. This is information on the Alberni Valley, but in your report you'll see that we have rolled up regional information as well as all the sub-regional areas, which is going to be really very helpful to make some localized decisions. So this shows that there's 3,725 children in that age bracket, 0 to 14. It's 0 to 12 for childcare, but with Stats Canada, there's a little change in age there, and how many of each age groups are there. The other side, that little circle in the slide, is really what does it look like in terms of childcare in the valley, like what kinds of spaces are for very young children, because there's a whole lot of licensing involved in providing care. But at the end of the day, the statement at the bottom, in the Alberni Valley, there's 6 children for every existing licensed childcare space. If you compare that to the regional number, it's actually 5 children for every existing childcare space. So in the city here, there's a heightened kind of need. And when we looked at best practices around the country, it's really 1 and 2 is what the preferred target is. So 2 children for every space. So we're a long way off.
So key findings, one of the findings that we found was that the findings actually didn't vary across the region. The 4 top findings were consistent amongst the whole region. One of the biggest things, top space needs being infant, toddler, and before and after school care. That's evident in each one of our communities. Options for parents, especially for parents of multiple children, when and where they access care was severely limited. So that ability for flexibility and affordability was a very large consideration to make in terms of childcare moving forward. Not surprisingly, childcare has a tremendous impact, economic impact on families and communities. Additionally, and I think almost most importantly, we don't want to leave out the early childhood educators. So really recognizing that the early childcare and education sector is really undervalued and not sufficiently compensated for the type of work that they're doing. So seeing a lot of wages that were under or around $15 an hour for individuals with education, and a pretty demanding role within the community. So the Port Alberni specific findings for this project are on pages 19 to 25 of the report, if you're interested. For our recommendations, we really worked on parsing these out into provincial, local government, and then community-based recommendations. So what you'll see in terms of the provincial government, our recommendations are very much policy related. We're looking at the implementation of a $10 a day or similar childcare plan, which lessens the burden both on parents as well as on the early childhood education sector. I think I need to start saying ECE sector because I'm having a hard time getting my mouth around it while I'm presenting. And I think I've done this presentation a few too many times now. So we're also looking at examining licensing regulations, so it's a little bit easier for people to open spaces and open childcare centers, and looking at both creating spaces and assisting with operating costs, because a lot of the opportunities that we're seeing right now is very space creation orientated and has no ability to assist centers once they've opened up. On top of that is really looking at attracting ECEs to the field and maintaining the quality of those spaces. And then the last, I think, is very much in relation to coordination. So in order for local communities, in order for local governments to assist in the provincial government or to advocate to the provincial government, we do need some measures. We do need some ability to coordinate and collaborate. And a lot of those networks and those capacities, the funding has been cut towards them. So really looking at provincial recommendations around ensuring that there is some coordination support from the provincial government to local communities in order to increase the capacity. Recommendations for local government, very much advocacy based. One really looking at the sector, advocating for a $10 a day childcare implementation, working with local communities in the community agency recommendations section, and then also updating or adding childcare supporting policies. So within the report, we do have a list of zoning, bylaw, and possibly amendments that communities could be asking for. So ensuring that they have a good look at that, refer that to staff, and see what kinds of opportunities there might be for their community.
So with childcare, it's absolutely not a supply and demand only issue. It's much more complex than that. And the stories that you'll read throughout the report from the voices of families will help to kind of add some painting to that canvas to express that. So when we created the recommendations for community agencies, you'll see that a lot of it is around collaboration and partnership, because it's not just a simply there's a need, we fill it, and then it's done. There is definitely a requirement for people to start to work together in different ways and to come up with some innovative solutions. In the report as well, there's more than just 4 bullets. There's a whole lot of specific ideas of what kinds of organizations could think about partnering with others. And then finally, what we want to let you hope that you take away from this is actually that even though this report was all about increasing childcare spaces, a space creation project, there really is 2 parallel crises that are happening here in our region, but also across the province. And that is both, there isn't enough spaces for children, for families to get the childcare that they need. But we can't just open spaces because there isn't the staff to provide the quality service. So there's 2 things going on here. So that's your takeaway.
Okay. Thank you very much for the work that you guys have done, and thanks for coming to present it to the city as well. Are there questions from council? Councillor Paulson.
Thanks very much for the presentation, guys. One of the things that kind of jumped out at me is compensation for people, and you have to compensate to get good people. At $10 a day health care, do you have a handle on what the subsidy would be if we were to arrive at a livable or affordable range for professionals in this field? Because I don't think $10 a day covers your costs. So we're talking about a subsidy probably from the provincial government. Have you got a thought on that? I don't need exact figures, but just a thought and how we could get there.
So the $10 a day, we reference that because it does have actual very good economic backbone to it. So it's a plan that's been put forward to the provincial government. There's actually a website for it if you'd like to take a look into the economics of the plan, but it does have a very kind of solid backing in how that would work, what that would look like. So $10 a day, that would be for families to be paying $10 a day, and then there's additional kind of infrastructure that's being put into this sector in order to ensure that wages for the early childhood educators are increased as well. So it is kind of a double-pronged way of tackling some of the issues. So they have a very good kind of overview piece if you wanted to take a further look.
Yeah. Great. Councillor Solda.
It's interesting. I'd love to go back when my kids were smaller. I was making $2 a day, and my sitter was making a lot more, and my take home was $2 after I paid off the sitter. So I definitely know how families feel today, and childcare was really hard. I was fortunate because I had neighbors that looked after my kids, but I still had to pay them. So I think this is a good program. Thank you.
Other comments? Okay. Well, I want to really thank you guys for the work that's been done here. One figure that really stood out to me, and I know it's, all in the general childcare crisis issue right now, but when we were at UBCM this year, I was on a childcare panel where the minister talked about the new affordable childcare subsidy or benefit program, which is, I guess, different from the subsidy that used to exist, and gave a figure that about 80,000 families in BC now qualify for affordable childcare benefits, which is the subsidy, but only about 20,000 families are registered for it. So I think that's very impactful, that there's a lot of work to be done still in families, understanding that they have to apply for this new program where they may not have qualified before. They do qualify now. That doesn't help with finding the spaces, of course, but it's opened it up to different types of childcare as well. So there's a lot changing in the industry for sure, and just people keeping up with it is a huge challenge as well. Yeah. And I wanted to ask about, in the report, you guys have some specific, you talk about some specific zoning for group childcare in all neighborhoods, offer zoning application assistance to new childcare centers, waive business license fees for in-home childcare providers, that type of thing. I guess this isn't a question to you guys, but a question to our CAO. The recommendation we have here for moving forward is to continue to let the ACRD manage childcare community planning program on behalf of the city of Port Alberni. How do we action these things that the ACRD can't action for us when they're to do with our zoning bylaws and business licensing?
That's a great point, Madam Mayor. If you'd like to modify that motion, if you want, to direct staff to look at that report and come back with action items specific to the municipality. We'll do that.
Great, I would like to. Thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions, thank you very much for the presentation today. And I will move that that Council for the City of Port Alberni continue to support the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District in managing the Community Childcare Planning Program on behalf of the City of Port Alberni, and further direct staff to come back to Council with recommendations on moving forward with the report recommendations. Second, any comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no unfinished business today, so on to staff reports, and item 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Acting Director of Finance dated December 9, 2019 be received and checks numbered 145014 to 145111 inclusive, and payments of accounts totaling $2,271,230.46 be approved.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. And item 2 from the city clerk, we have tag day applications. I think this is pretty standard, comes to us every year. Are there any questions of council on the report? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council for the City of Port Alberni approve the 2020 Tag Day allocations as outlined in Attachment 1 of the 2020 Tag Day Applications Report dated December 2nd, 2019.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. On to item 3 from the City Clerk, 3123 3rd Avenue facade. City Clerk, if you want to just speak to this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council has received a petition signed by 33 Valley residents stating that they find the building at 3123 3rd Avenue to be unattractive and offensive to the community, and requesting the owner be ordered to improve the facade by a specific date. The building is the Squash and Billiards Club. It's located just below 3rd and Argyle, adjacent to the new Dog Mountain Brewing. It's just across the street from the Harbourview Apartments. The registered owner is a numbered company. The principal is Randy Brown. Through the city's partnership with Community Futures Alberni Clackwat, the owner of the property has applied for and been approved for funding under the Business Facade Improvement Program to improve the appearance of the building. Community Futures has notified the owner that they have extended the end date for completion of the facade improvements to March 20th, 2020. As council is aware, this particular building has been wrapped in construction paper, Tyvek paper, for quite some time. Although, considering the appearance of some of the other buildings in the uptown area, it is relatively tidy. Staff is of the opinion that there are much other higher priority buildings that require more immediate attention, and that we should allow the time that Community Futures has given to March 20th for completion of the works. But if council does want to take more immediate action, council could consider directing staff to investigate what options might be available to declare the building a nuisance under the community charter provisions. Council may have noted that just over the last couple of days, some improvements have been made to the building. The paper is now painted black. And the owner, Randy Brown, is in the audience today and has indicated he'd be prepared to answer any questions council might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Although I'm disappointed that because there's a lot of people up on the 3rd Avenue that are trying to beautify that whole block, and a little disappointed about what the recommendations are. In the report it says that in addition there are much other higher priority buildings requiring more immediate action. Can I bother the CEO to name a few?
I think we could name one directly across the street.
Madam Mayor, you test my memory. So the building across the street it was designated a nuisance building, and then council recall removed that designation because the calls for service decreased. There are 3, as I recall, buildings still designated as nuisances. I believe that's the Carlson, the former CJAV building, Upper 3rd, and the Beaufort Hotel. And if I named one of those mistakenly, I apologize. I think those are current information. And those nuisance designations are based on recommendations from the city's nuisance building working group, and they look at this issue from a perspective of calls for service. And so where various city resources are called to a building and we can't manage down that nuisance with any other tools, we've asked council to declare a nuisance, designate that building as a nuisance, and that has worked well in the case of the Harbourview. So those buildings are still on our radar. I know our staff are actively working with the owner on the former CJV building right now. There are some other buildings that are not designated as nuisance but are on what we call a watch list, and so staff are actively working with the owners of those buildings. It doesn't mean that if council sees this as a priority, if council wants us to act on it as a priority, of course we'll do that. Just the recommendation from staff is that on balance, this isn't creating as much a nuisance to the community as those other buildings could if we were to turn our attention away from them. And we think that with the facade program pending, there's a good likelihood of success on this facade without going the route of designating a nuisance building. If we did that, we would have to undertake the work ourselves and then put the cost back on the owner.
Okay,
does that help, Madam Mayor? That's just a
yeah, I think that's very helpful. Councillor Washington, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. I do respect the staff's recommendations and everything, but I just know that there's people out there who are gonna say, you know, how come you didn't do it, sort of thing. But I just, like I say, I'll go along with the staff opinion, because they've got things well in hand.
Madam Mayor, if I can jump in, this is, I don't disagree that this is a visual nuisance. It's not a use nuisance per se. And some of the other buildings that we're managing have the potential to be a considerable nuisance to the neighborhoods. And so we're spending a lot of staff time on some of those buildings. That not about the appearance of those buildings, but about the way they're being used or potentially used.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Haggard?
I agree with Councillor Washington. It's very discouraging when businesses on the 3rd Avenue corridor spend a lot of time and money and effort trying to improve their facades and beautify the area. And we have a facade like this that has been let go for so long. However, because Community Futures has agreed to extend the deadline, I will support that. And then at the meeting right after the March 20th deadline, I would like to have this brought back to council if it's not completed, and we could take action on it at that time.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson, did you have a comment?
Well, I agree with Councillor Haggard on this point. I guess my biggest concern is we've seen the building was shiplap, then there was Tyvek put on the front. Now it's painted, and possibly the proponent could address his plans in his capability or ability to meet that March 20th deadline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if the proponent is willing to come forward and just speak to plans for, hoping to finish off the building, that would be great.
Here's an updated picture of it, and it probably looks better than 90% of the buildings in Port Alberni now.
But not your neighbors.
Just by putting some lipstick on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyways, any questions?
So I think his question was on, what your plans are for the exterior of the building, and if you are optimistic that you'll be able to meet the extended deadline to March 20th.
We will be able to meet that deadline, and Becky, we will be spending between $50,000 and $60,000 on the front of that building, which isn't the problem we had is really actually Community Futures. They're not willing to lend money, so we have to go out and find money, and we're that close to getting it. We got 15 to 20,000 right now. We want to have all the money before we start.
Great. Okay. And what are your plans? What are you planning to do to the building?
I could show you the drawing, but I don't have it on me.
That's fine. You don't have to explain it today.
It's very beautiful.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Solda? Okay. Councillor Corbeil?
Well, most of the questions I had have been answered, and I realize this is probably a fairly big project, so maybe it does make sense that the deadline's March. But before I've spoken about our priorities, and I've had more people bring this up to me than many of the other things we work on, and you see just 2 buildings over a new establishment that looks very nice. There's places further up 3rd Avenue. They're putting a lot of work into their buildings. And we're starting to turn the corner, and I just hope, that's a beautiful building inside. Mm-hmm. I want it to be a beautiful building on the outside, and we're slowly making some progress on making the uptown look presentable again. So, I hope everything works out for you and you meet the March deadline.
Thank you. Councillor
Boone? Just to say that I think we should remind ourselves that change takes time, and I think a lot of people in town are working towards that change, and we all have the same goals to improve the appearance of our city. So I hope that it is complete by March 20th, and if not, then we should revisit at that point.
Thank you. Thank you, and thanks for being willing to answer questions.
Thanks for your time.
The standards that we all have of your area are certainly being, elevated due to the positive happening in that area with the brewery down the road, and the space next door has had some improvements as well, and we're definitely seeing it throughout that area. So I'm optimistic that you'll be able to, help your building reach that standard on the exterior as well in the near future.
Yep. I invite anybody who hasn't been in yet to come and have a look. It's beautiful inside.
Thank you. Okay. And I do think that, we've had some conversation about some of the other buildings in the area that are causing nuisance. And I don't know if we need a motion for this today, but I do think we need to investigate specifically the building across the street, what our options are. Our nuisance property bylaw did create some improvement for some time, but the building really, appearance-wise and mess outside certainly has fallen back down to a lower standard, and I hear quite regularly the concerns that it's causing for neighbors who are improving their spaces and looking to invest in the area. So I do think we need to start to explore what our options are as a municipality to deal with that building in a different way. So I'll just leave that with the CAO and hope it will be brought back soon. Okay. Councillor Paulson, would you like to move receipt of this report? And certainly you can make a different motion if you like.
Well, I'd like to move that the report from the city clerk dated December 3rd, 2019 be received. Okay. And I will make another motion.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Second. Okay. On receipt of the report, all in favor? Carried.
And I'd also like to move that that the owner be allowed to meet the March 20th, 2020 deadline as approved by Community Futures.
Second.
Do I need to expand on that?
Okay. No. And there was comment about bringing it back the meeting after. I'm wondering if you'd be happy with an amendment to add to that motion to check back in on the status following the March 20th deadline.
And that staff report back after the March 20th, 2020 deadline with a report on their findings.
Perfect. Okay, moved
and
and...
You could wordsmith that to death.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. I think we're all optimistic that the work will be done. Okay, moving on to item 4 from the city clerk, Rain Coast Cannabis.
Mayor, this report is requesting Council's consideration of a retail cannabis store to be located at 4102 Redford Street. Earlier in 2019, Council adopted an amendment to its zoning bylaw to permit retail cannabis stores within the city's 4 commercial zones and to regulate setback requirements in relation to schools. The proposed site for this business, as I mentioned, is 4102 Redford Street. Within the city limits and its zone C2, our general commercial area, and retail cannabis stores are a permitted use in the C2 zone. Notice for public comment was posted in the local newspaper as well as distributed to all properties within a 75-meter radius of the proposed site. One response was received, which is attached to the report in the agenda, and it's from a neighbouring business owner. Pleased to see a business going into that location and expressing disappointment that it's another cannabis retail store. The proposed location will be in compliance with all regulatory requirements identified by the province, and as well will be required to adhere to Health Canada's requirements and guidelines. As mentioned, the property is within the C2 zone. The proposed site is also in compliance with setback restrictions of being 300 meters from any school within city limits. And the property also falls into a development permit area, number 2 commercial. And certainly as of the end of last week, no building permit had yet been received for the building. The owner, Mr. John Salakin, is in the audience today if council has any particular questions of him.
Thank you. Okay, council, are there questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say how much is enough. As a council, we've taken the avenue of let the market dictate how many stores are going to be built. But, and maybe, you know, I'm deep down inside, I was hoping for the Kentucky Fried Chicken to come back, but I guess it's not coming back, so, you know, I'm okay with this, but, you know, I'm very curious, how many more stores do we really need in this town?
And maybe the city clerk could give an update on how many we actually have currently, because the number that we have and the number that we've given approval to are different. Just because we approve them doesn't mean the province will.
And that's correct, Madam Mayor. So council may support a particular application. It then goes to the province for them to do their fit and proper designation. So council support doesn't mean that a business will actually be approved, as there's still quite an extensive process to be undertaken. So as of now, council has previously supported 7 applications. 5 have been approved by the province, and that includes the provincial store. 2 are either have not been approved or are still pending approval. And city business licenses issued to date are 4, and that includes 1 to the provincial store.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Poon.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with letting the market decide on how many stores that we have. I think we should consider this. How many tobacco retail outlets do we have? I think we have a lot more than 7. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Corbell. How much more do we need? But council did say we're going to let the market determine it too, so I will support it. I do agree with Valley Vision's letter, totally. And but this particular building really needs the renovation. It's been like this for a long time, so it'll be an extensive renovation, I'm sure, because they have to gut the inside, and we'll see what the market dictates.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson?
I'm going to vote against the motion, only because I do totally concur with Dr. Galamba's letter. If we approve this one and they actually get approval, that'll put 3 of them within a 6-block area, and quite honestly, from my point of view, and maybe it's just a personal point of view, we don't need that many. I don't think we need more than 7 even, but and I happened to be away when the other approvals were done for various reasons, but I will be voting against the motion on this one, just because I think we're oversubscribed already. Thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At a regional district meetings quite some time ago, it was dubbed Johnson Road was Cannabis Corridor, and I think now Redford Road is now going to be called Cannabis Corridor, because I actually think it's 4 that have been approved within that radius. Sometimes there's benefits to economic clustering, but I don't see the benefits to clustering cannabis stores all in one area. So I have to agree with Councillor Paulson. My instincts are saying don't, and I know our bylaw says we don't have any reason not to support it, but I just can't support another one in this area.
Thank you. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Being last means everything's already been said, but no, it's a hard pill to swallow. But again, I think it's going to be what the market will bear, and if that building gets fixed up, even at least for a short time, that's something for Redford Street anyway.
Thank you. And I would say, while I agree that I think 7 for our community is too many. If 7 is too many, 7 will be too many, and we will end up with fewer. But it's difficult, I think, for us to say that one, would be inferior to the one down the road, or vice versa. So I believe in letting the market decide which one will be successful or which ones will be successful. And at the end of the day, worst case scenario, we end up with improvements in a local property that has not had improvements. So if, that one doesn't end up lasting, then at least we have a renovated space instead of a space with, paper over the windows for several years. And then that space is at least marketable, because we know that a huge part of the problem with our vacant spaces in the community is not necessarily that we don't have businesses to fill them. It's that they require a significant investment before a business can fill them. So absolute worst case scenario, we end up we end up with spaces that are ready for other businesses to come in and occupy. So I'm going to support this because I want the spaces to be updated and because I think the market will ultimately dictate how many we end up with, and I don't see us ending up with 7. And if, the people who are developing the businesses feel that there's a market, then I personally don't feel that it's our place to stop them. So, Councillor Solda.
I just want to say one more comment. It's just like having so many grocery stores. So do we say how many can come into Port Alberni? How many restaurants? Even if they're on the same block, if there's 10 restaurants on a block, one of them is going to close eventually because it's not sustainable. So how do we dictate that? But I do just want to say Valley Vision, I totally agree with you, but it's what we had voted on in the previous.
And Valley Vision notes, the positivity with the space being improved also, and ultimately, hopefully, the space being filled. So it is difficult, and I don't think any perspective is the wrong one here. It's just a challenging issue. Councillor Poon, would you like to read these motions?
I'll move that the report from the City Clerk dated December 4th, 2019 be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
On receipt of the report, all in favor? Carried. And if you want to continue?
Yes, I'll move that Council for the City of Port Alberni supports the approval and authorization of Raincoast Cannabis Incorporated, located at 4102 Redford Street, and endorses the comments as provided in the report from the City Clerk dated December 4th, 2019.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5 from the Manager of Planning, Development Variance Permit for 4279 Raven Hill. And the first thing we will do is invite the Manager of Planning to love that I get to just read it out so nicely here. Invite the Manager of Planning to provide comment, background information regarding the application, including any correspondence or late correspondence received.
Perfect. So before you today for final consideration is the development variance permit that you would have heard about a few weeks ago for 4279 Ravenhill Avenue. So the applicant has requested to vary the total allowable floor area of accessory buildings in order to construct 2 accessory dwelling buildings at a particular size, which is about 140 square feet over the current allowable floor space or floor area. The requested variance should not result in a significant increase to the overall footprint of the development, and the large size of the property and the semi-rural setting should mitigate any potential building crowding and minimize any visual impacts. In terms of the public notice, we have sent out public notice in accordance with the Local Government Act, and the Planning Department has not received any comments to date. So for those reasons, we support the development variance, as well as the Advisory Planning Commission has indicated their support for the development variance permit.
Thank you. And I will invite presentation by the applicant if the applicant is here and wishes to speak. Okay. And any input from the public, if any members of the public would like to speak to this issue, this application. Okay, seeing none. Any questions from council? All right. Then Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the development variance permit number 97 to vary section 6.10.6 accessory buildings in A zones, A1, FD, regulations for the total floor area of all accessory buildings from 85 square meters, 915 feet, to 97.8 square meters, 1,052.7 square feet, a variance of 12.8, 137.8 square feet for the property located at 4279 Ravenhill Avenue and legally described as Lot 5, District Lot 1, Alberni District, Plan 11303, except that part in Plan 25083, PID 004-990-4210, be authorized by City Council.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 6 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage. We have the Community Investment Program and 2019 recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm back with the annual Community Investment Program figures for you and report. So for 2020, $36,500 in-kind and cash grants were budgeted. And Council will be reminded that there was the creation of the Alberni Valley Community Forest Stream, which added an additional $10,000 to the fund. And the 28 applications that are attached in your agenda package there, none of those applications met the mandate of the community forest. And so it's the committee's intention that staff would reach back out to the community forest and look to run a separate campaign for that $10,000 figure. So the numbers that I've included there are just that $39,800 is just the budgeted and the reserve funds, not including the community forest stream. I'd like to look at handling that separately to ensure that suitable applications are reviewed for those funds. As in years past, the requests are still over double what the available dollars are there. And also one change for council to note as well is that the committee has elected to allocate all of the grant funds as opposed to retaining a buffer. So the committee wanted to relay to council that it's important to consider that applicants who follow the process and they're able to submit all the documentation and their applications on time, part of honoring that process is to ensure that that we're following that process rather than considering late applicants in the same vein or with the same criteria when they're not meeting the same criteria as others. And so the committee would suggest that in the event that requests come throughout the 2020 calendar year, they're referred to the 2021 process. So often for new events, have an opportunity to get the event underway, have it successful in the year 2020, and then have those folks seeking funds steered to the 2021 process.
Okay, are there questions? Councillor Haggard.
Do you want questions on specific items on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, concerns?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Thank you it must have been very difficult to make all these decisions trying to cut down. Every cause is such a good cause. The only one I do have a concern about is the Community Arts Council because they've already been hit with the permissive tax exemption funding, and now they're hitting with this. Is there any way that we could maybe talk to them and say, you know, over the next couple of years, we're going to have to cut this back so much per year until you're self-sufficient, or I don't know.
Could you clarify, actually, are they being hit? Councillor Haggard said they're being hit with this. I think what she means is they applied for $7,500 and got $5,000. One of my questions was going to be, what did they receive last year? Because I wonder if that's actually an increase from what they've had in the past.
I would have to go back and pull some more specifics, Madam Mayor, for previous grants that were allocated to each of the returning. So in the case of the Community Arts Council, though, specifically, so in this case, it's the committee had elected to retain the matching grant. And so with that, so you'll notice that matching grant, the requested amount was $5,000, and that was the recommended distribution. And when you think about the portion that the $5,000 represents in comparison to many other applications. And so the committee is looking to balance impact. So lots of applicants receive some dollars as opposed to a handful receiving the lion's share. And then also understanding that one applicant doesn't receive far more than others. So in this case with the Community Arts Council, it is larger than many other grants that are recommended based on it being a matching grant. So the ability for the Community Arts Council to leverage with other grant funds.
Yeah. And I know we've only been through this process once as this council, but it's very rare for organizations, especially asking for an amount in that range, to receive the total amount. So I don't think this would be a surprise to them. I actually wondered, looking through, if that was more than they had received in the past. So we can certainly reach out and find that. Councillor Solda.
In the past, when the Community Arts Council puts in an application in anything to do with the city, they do get matching grants, and if we take back their grant, they would get less from where they get the matching, and that wouldn't be good.
Okay, and so I think we're not doing that. We're giving them the funds for the matching grant.
Correct.
Are there other questions on this? Okay, I have a couple. One that stood out to me was 5 Acre Shaker. I think asked for $5,000 and was one of the few that got zero. So I would imagine they didn't qualify for some reason, but could we speak to that one?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So the 5 Acre Shaker, 5 Acre Productions wasn't able to clarify or confirm that they are eligible as a nonprofit organization. So just for council's benefit, each of the applicants are not required to provide a society number. So it's not a case of that they need to be a registered nonprofit society. However, they must have the ability to be eligible. So any private entities, government entities, that sort of thing would not apply. So based on the 5 Acre Productions application, they weren't able to verify that they are indeed a nonprofit.
Okay, thank you. And then just on your comments now about, I was reading through the report and looking and thinking, where's the extra money? Because every year we do leave extra money aside for late applications, and we've sort of built that into our regular process. When I looked through the list, one that stood out to me as not being on the list that typically is the Capitol Theatre. So I reached out to Brent Ronning, and he said, oh, we missed the deadline. And so I said, do you not normally get one? And he said, no, we do. We apply for our utilities. And he said last year they applied for some, I think, hall rentals for main stage, which is coming back again this year. So I'm worried about having allocated all the funds and not left any for that, given that I think especially when, this is not a new event, it's an organization that applies every year, always applies on time, but maybe this year didn't because of a large production they just put on. I'm a bit concerned about not having funds left over for that kind of mistake.
One thing, Madam Mayor, just to speak to process. So and to bring council up to speed, since different council members have been involved in the process differently or for different lengths of time. So when I arrived in Port Alberni, my goal was to ensure the community investment program was as accessible as possible. So we've shifted the deadlines. There's over 30 days longer than ever. So the past two, this cycle and the previous, we've given applicants an extra month to apply for the funds. I personally reach out to every applicant over the previous 3 years. So if an individual has been involved in any part of the process for the previous 3 years, whether they're still in town or not, I do reach out to them personally multiple times throughout the year. So I also, staff posts the application form early in the spring, and I believe it was March or February this past year. So the application period runs approximately from beginning of March until the beginning of November. And so it's very difficult, of course, for the committee to review applications that don't arrive in a timely fashion. So just to give council a bit of perspective there, that we work very, very hard to educate community so that all organizations have the opportunity to apply. There have been specific barriers in the past for organizations that have found themselves sort of behind as far as from timelines, or they're recognizing that they're not going to be able to hit deadlines. I've also worked directly with individuals either over the phone or in person to assist them in completing their applications forms. So again, to try to eliminate as many barriers as we can. And at some point, I would suggest that we need to have a deadline. So again, we can honor those organizations that have made the effort to follow the process.
I think that's definitely fair. And I, commend you guys for doing all that you can to get people to submit on time. I think this has been a year of exceptions not a year of exceptions, but this has been a challenging year for some of our nonprofits because of the permissive tax exemption changes anyways. And I would have a problem with, when I spoke to Brent today, I said, but don't worry, we always leave extra funds for, because we always do. And so it's difficult to make that change on top of the permissive tax exemption change now as well. That said, I mean, I agree we have to respect the applications that have been put in on time. And I know in the past we have not approved applications late who have made multiple late applications in a row. It's challenging when we have organizations that do really good work in our community and typically do submit on time, to not make that exception though. So I guess if we receive a late application, we will see what happens then.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, just to recap from this time last year, so the committee had suggested, and what council had approved last year, was that if any recurring or repeat applicant had come late after the deadline, they would not receive any grant funds. So they would be denied grant funds. The buffer over the previous year has been used for any new applicants that came forward. So I would challenge that if we followed the same process as we did last year, an organization like the Capitol Theatre that may had received funds previously under that same idea, the committee would actually deny funds if they were applying again this year.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would somebody like to make the motion here? Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report dated December 9th, 2019 be received and council for the City of Port Alberni approve the 2020 Community Investment Program recommendations of the Community Investment Program Committee in the amount of $39,800.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay. No bylaws today. Correspondence for action. Letter dated November 27th, 2019 from Wesley Bloxham requesting council support a process of public engagement to develop a phased approach to carry out improvements to Argyle Street and 3rd Avenue. Council, are there any questions on this or comments? Councillor Haggard.
I just want to applaud him from taking the time and the initiative to present this to council. It was a very good reading. He's got some great ideas, and what I'd like to do is when we do get to work on Argyle Street, which is not going to be immediate, that we certainly try and work with him. He had some really good ideas. So I don't know if he's in the audience, but thank you.
And 3rd Avenue as well is included in here under some similar themes. So we certainly could reach out to Wes on when we start going through our designs for 3rd Avenue. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This individual references a study that was done in 2007, and I'm not sure how easy that is to find, but if staff could dig it up for us, I'd be very interested to see it.
Yes, it is on the city website. I think it's called, where's Pat Deacon when we need him? He just left. I think it's called the Uptown and Harbor Key. I don't know. It's something like that.
Is there a plan?
Well, we do have it. It is on the city's website. So we can just find the name of it and search it and provide it to council for sure. Yes, it's a great report. Councillor Paulson?
Once again, looking through the report that was provided in our agenda and everything, it's a great report. I really like it. There was a $2 million price tag attached to those improvements in 2007, which I would suspect would be $4 to $5 million today. And what I found with consultants' reports like this, sometimes you have to kind of tone it back to get to what you can afford. And but I like the fact that he mentioned phased development.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a 10-year plan or something like that. To ease the pain over 10 years and maybe tone it down a bit so it's more affordable.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Poon.
I think if we do a phased approach, it will help the community, I guess, spark the imagination, so that, if people see the concept, they will be more, they will approach it with some more support, maybe.
For sure. And I think just to add to the comments that have been made, our strategic plan really does envision very similar to theme to what he's drawn up here. And there's Pat Deacon. We were wondering if you have off the top of your mind, there's conversation of the 2007 report that was done on the uptown and waterfront streetscapes. Do you remember the name of it? He can find it for us at some point.
Offhand, I think it was called the Uptown and Waterfront Redevelopment Study.
I should have just gone with my... That's pretty close.
It contained 9 major recommendations. Happy to report out on those. In fact, I have gone and prepared or taken a look at all of the reports that we've had that pertain to the economic development arena and summarize the recommendations and where we stand.
That's excellent.
So
Thank you.
I'll bring something
Thank you very
forward.
much. And so I was just saying that our strategic plan really does envision a similar concept to what's being talked about here. And it also does envision a phased approach. I mean, we're not going to rip up all of these streets and do all of this work in 1 year. What we're talking about is a block at a time, 2 blocks in some cases when it makes more sense to do that. But really looking to, revitalize the streetscapes in our downtown or uptown sector with a plan for moving forward. So with that, Councillor Paulson, do you want to make this motion?
Sure. I'd like to move that the letter dated November 27th, 2019, requesting council support and to initiate a public engagement process to develop a phased approach to carry out improvements to Argyle Street and 3rd Avenue be received.
Okay, any further comments? All in favor? Carried. No proclamations today, so informational correspondence. City Clerk.
Yes, Madam Mayor, you have correspondence from the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, which expresses their full support and endorsed council's budget plans for 2020. You also have correspondence from UBCM, which outlines the gas tax payment for the 2019-2020 year in the amount of just under $400,000. And for your information is attached Advisory Planning Commission minutes in draft form dated November 21st.
Thank you. Are there any items councillors would like to highlight or discuss? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, but I have to ask that nearly $400,000, have we earmarked it for something, or
Always.
has it been already put away for something?
Madam Mayor, it's identified as capital, as funding for capital projects beginning in 2020.
And I think the question is more, is that the budgeted amount that we were expecting? It's not, I would imagine, in excess. Yeah, we've essentially earmarked it for projects going forward. It's not new money.
Ordinarily, we would have a covering staff report there to tell you what the previous amount was and what our expectations were. We can bring that to a next meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, we don't have that.
Okay, other items people would like to highlight? Okay, I just want to highlight item 1 from the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce. Myself and Councillor Haggard attended the Chamber of Commerce board meeting last week or the week before and had discussion about our budget, the draft budget, and with their board, and the feedback was really positive. And while I think they very much recognized that it's difficult to pass a budget with a tax increase, they passed a motion unanimously to support fully our budget for moving forward as is, which obviously we are going to make changes to it still. And they did that with the recognition that they like our strategic plan and they want to see us action and implement and move forward with our strategic plan. So I just want to really thank the Chamber of Commerce for taking that step and for the support that they're offering for us, because it is certainly not an easy budget year for us. Okay, Councillor Haggard, would you like to move receipt?
I move that the informational correspondence items numbered 1 through 3 be received and filed.
Is there a seconder? Second. Okay, and any comments? All in favor? Carried. No report from in camera, so on to councillors' reports. We've got most of the reports in front of us. I know Councillor Corbeil has comments to make. Does anyone else have items to highlight from their reports? Councillor Haggard?
This isn't for my report, but Mayor Minions and I manned a kettle on Friday for a couple hours, and I'd like to challenge the other councillors to take a turn and to raise money for the Salvation Army. There was more need this year than probably in a lot of previous years, so if you have a couple of spare hours, please do so.
And surprise to Councillor Haggard, I signed us up for another shift. All right, thank you for that. Councillor Corbeil.
Yes, I'd just like to point out it was almost 2 weeks ago now, I guess, that I attended the beer and burger night at the Blue Marlin in support of the striking forestry workers. And it was really well organized. It was very successful. It was packed, and kudos to everybody that put it on. And I'd just like to point out, I've heard comments that mayor and council don't seem to care that much about what's going on right now, and I can tell you that that's certainly not correct. As a forestry worker myself in 1986. Jeff will remember this. We were on strike for approximately the same length of time they've been on strike right now. And we know firsthand how difficult that is. And my heart goes out to those striking workers. But we want to see them get a fair deal. And we want to see the negotiations work. We were asked to sign a letter recently. We decided not to, because it was our feeling that if the collective agreement can be negotiated, everybody will be a winner for it. And we can only hope that that happens sooner rather than later. I know just recently Madam Mayor was in Victoria talking to the Forest Minister about issues around the forest industry, and maybe I'll let the Mayor speak for herself. But forestry in this community is so darn important, and I can tell you that this council totally wants to see this solved, and we want to see it solved correctly, and we want to see people back to work with a good, fair contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. And absolutely, I know there's been a lot of concern in the community about why we didn't sign the letter that was put out there. And I think it's important to say that while we respect the intent of the letter, and unanimously as a council, we did respect the intent of the other communities that came together to write that letter. We didn't feel it was the right approach for us moving forward. But what we are trying to do is ensure that the forest industry in our community stays strong in other ways. So I did travel to Victoria to meet with Minister Donaldson because it is nice to meet in person and build those connections. And we talked about a lot of things in the forest sector, specifically around the challenges that we're seeing in our community with the strike and with the mosaic shutdown, and just what that actually means for a community like Port Alberni that is very heavily forest reliant. And we also talked about the future of the forest industry and how that we can make sure that we position ourselves as a community to take advantage of the value-added forest sector that we see developing in a lot of communities around us, and certainly in our community as well. So we had conversations about some of the specific companies that are looking to set up in different communities, and we want to make sure that we are top of mind for Minister of Forests when he's having conversations at different trade forums and things like that, and make sure that we are positioning ourselves to have a strong future in this industry. So I think it was a very good meeting, and it will be the first of many with this minister for sure. Okay. Any other comments about council reports or questions? Okay. Seeing none, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to move receipt of our reports?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to the city's business be received.
Perfect. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So on to new business. Item 1 from myself, Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Planning Function. So I will just read the motion and then I'll explain it. So it's that council direct staff to write to the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District expressing the city's interest in discussing the city's participation in the regional planning function. If I could get a seconder. Thank you. So council, recently there's been a lot of conversation about the Alberni Valley and our economy as a whole, certainly focused around cannabis and some of the decisions and direction in the regional district. But I think this issue goes a lot further than that. We often talk about how we are one valley and really one community, but we plan as if we are many different communities. I see a lot of opportunity for the city to work closer with the regional district in many circumstances, and certainly cannabis is one where it would have been nice for us to be able to have a stronger voice at that table and a vote on the issue. And because we don't participate in the regional planning function, we don't have a vote on that issue. So this is not committing us to anything. It's simply the beginning of a conversation. So what this letter would do is express that we're interested in sitting down, talking about what it would look like for us to participate in that function. The regional district, Alberni Valley directors would have their own conversation about whether they want us involved in that function. And then our staff will come together and start negotiating what that would look like for us to be involved cost-wise. And then it would come back to us and the regional district board as well. So I think it's a really great step. You know, although it's easy to make it about cannabis, I think it's important that we don't. I think this is about building more cohesive planning and, you know, a plan for our entire area and making sure that we're moving in the same direction rather than occasionally opposite directions. Are there any questions? Okay, you guys are quiet today. So the motion is moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And then Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to move this next motion that the council direct staff to prepare a report speaking to the opportunities, benefits, and costs associated with the installation of fiber optics within the city boundaries, including the city's ability to own and operate the utility and the economic development opportunities and benefits the city may experience should a fiber optics network be made available to the private sector and the community in general.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this? Or Councillor Solda, did you want to speak to it at all?
I just think it's a long time coming and we should really look into this. I think for emergency planning, it's a good benefit, and I really am interested to see about burying the optics rather than putting them on pole. I know it's going to cost a fortune, but if there's a storm, the lines are down. What was the whole point of which I don't want to piecemeal anything, so I think it's a great opportunity for the city. And we're probably one of the only cities that don't have fiber optics. There's a few I think there's smaller communities might not, but I'll be interested in see what that report holds and how many communities do have it and the success of having it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and this is just a report looking for initial information.
That's correct.
Okay, so seeing no other comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And that takes us to question period, which is an opportunity for the public and press to ask questions of mayor and council. Are there any members of the public who would like to ask a question? Okay, there's still people here. Somebody's got to want to ask a question. Okay, well, we won't force anyone, so with that, would somebody like to move adjournment? Okay, second. Oh. Yes, if you'd like to come forward to ask a question, you're welcome to. So this is a portion of the meeting is just for questions. If you have new business to bring forward, you can do it at public input period, or but you only have 3 minutes then. If you want to speak to our city clerk at the Frontier after the meeting, you can set up a time to make a formal presentation to council. Thank you. Okay, so adjournment has been moved and seconded. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.